Family tradition since 1897.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Victor Davis Hanson, VDH, writing about colleges, the college admissions scandal at National Review. Something in this country went radically wrong in the 80s and 90s. We created an entire subversive ideology, according to which loud allegiance to progressivism, decrying class, race, and gender inequality, excused an institution or industry from bias, exempted it from the letter and spirit of the U.S. Constitution, made competency in its mission of educating youth irrelevant. And we're talking about the Ivy League schools, too, at least VDHs specifically. And worse still, so-called progressive egalitarians transformed the idea of an elite college degree from a recollection of wide reading, inductive thinking, and scientific and mathematical literacy into a mere cattle brand, a showy trademark that advertised social justice virtue and provided entree into the well-paying capitalist rat race. Yet once politics serves as such a blanket exemption for institutions, then it's no surprise that the institutions ignore or even normalize fraud, racial and class discrimination, and consumer misinformation. The rationale of contemporary higher education is that such progressive angels surely cannot be self-interested devils.
Ooh, that's good.
And we've found out, we've known, but we found out spectacularly with the admissions scandal that has ensnared the likes of Aunt Becky and
poor Aunt Becky.
Mrs. William H. Macy, that that is indeed a contradiction that plays itself out in real life. G. Nordlinger, also at National Review, has an interesting piece, too, that he, in response to a New York Times story about a selective enrollment school in New York City.
Oh,
that only
my ears have perked up.
Yeah, that only 7 black students got into out of 895 spots. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this is the selective outrage of the left when it comes to college admissions. So they're going to count by race with respect to black students at Stuyvesant in New York City. They don't want to count by race when it comes to Asian students at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
And this is, the world of paradoxes you get into when you allow colleges to become what Victor Davis Hanson described them to be. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Jay Nordlinger, senior editor for National Review and music critic for the New Criterion. Jay, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. So, develop your review of that New York Times story and the implications that the New York Times intended for it, but, put it in the context of these admissions scandals and counting by race that go a lot of different directions.
Well, there's this school in New York City, Stuyvesant High. It's really the best. It's number one. It's extremely hard to get into. And it's been a great ticket to success for many kids, a lot of them from immigrant and poor backgrounds, because they give a test, an entrance exam. And that is the basis of admissions. And so you sometimes get outcomes that you don't necessarily want, depending on who you are, right? So next year, 74% of the class will be Asian. That's a lot. But this thing is done according to a test. And so that will happen if you have this objective criterion. Otherwise, so people are up in arms about this, some people. But one of my points is let there be one Stuyvesant High School here in New York amid hundreds and thousands. It's highly, highly selective, but it's also the object of a lot of envy, as you can imagine.
So does race play a factor at all? Because here in Chicago, we have selective enrollment, and they abolished race. Now it depends on where you live. It's called tiers. So tier 1 is the poorer neighborhoods, and tier 4 are the nicer neighborhoods. And
so it's a proxy for race.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly. But how does it work there?
Right. No, this is a citywide thing. Mm-hmm. It's extremely competitive. And, it sounds a little bit heartless, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. And not everyone can get in. This is an enormous city of millions and millions of people. And as Dan mentioned, there are 895 slots at Stuyvesant. And so if you can't get in, you'll have to go elsewhere. I myself wouldn't be able to get within sniffing distance of that school on math scores alone, believe me.
Yeah, I mean, right. But so the question is, what are all the different camps that are outraged about paying $500,000 to try and shepherd your kid into USC of all places? What is it they want to? What is it they want to do exactly? Do you want a meritocracy where for example, what I've proposed here with state universities is randomly assigned number to an application, and all you see is the academic record, the extracurricular record, the essays, and whatnot. You don't see anything else: names, ranks, serial numbers, anything else. Do you want that, where it's just based on the substantive record the kid put together, or are we going to make exceptions? And what are the exceptions going to be? I mean, talking about public taxpayer financed universities generally. So, and are legacies the same thing, same sort of discrimination as counting by race? So what is the system that we should be advocating? Is there a possibility for a true meritocracy like you're talking about at Stuyvesant, where it's just the entrance exam and the scores tell the tale?
Well, I tell you, you don't often hear sympathy for admissions officers, but I really don't envy them. I really don't. It would be pretty easy if it were just a matter of a test score. Think of a sport. Think of golf. The lowest score wins.
Right.
Or think of swimming or track. You cross the line first, you touch the wall first, you win. Right. But college admissions is not necessarily like that. And I must say I don't envy those people. Because you got test scores, you got so-called extracurricular activities, you've got intangibles, and I think every college ought to do its best. Frankly, I'm not a great fan of affirmative action. Trust me, but schools, some of them do have a desire for this mix and ethnic and racial and geographic and even a class mix. There's a story that's told, Thomas Sowell told it about Governor Reagan in California. This is in the late 60s or early 1970s. And someone said, well, Governor, if we do things even Steven, Berkeley will be almost all Asian. And Reagan is said to have responded, so what?
Right.
Well, that's one point of view, and I think I share it. But people do have another point of view. And I think of these parents, these Hollywood parents. On one hand, it's an act of parental love. On the other hand, it's an act of shocking criminality and dishonesty, right?
Well,
and that's a pretty disgusting value to instill in your kid.
Well, and also,
some of the kids were in on it too, and some kids did not know that their parents were paying people to change the answers or take the test for them.
It's also a spectacular tribute.
Can you imagine their shame and shock? And imagine,
but it's also a spectacular.
Being the son or daughter of such parents.
It's also a spectacular tribute to vacuousness, because you're chasing exactly what Victor Davis Hanson said, the prestige of the cattle brand. You don't care about the kind of education your kid's going to get, and neither does your kid. He just needs the Yale the Yale stamp for entrance into the closed network, so he can have a summer home in the Hamptons too.
Yeah, I'm not sure how closed the network is. I think the United States is still a place for striving, for aspiration, and for bootstraps and all that good stuff. And a lot of people who come from modest circumstances do rise. And there seems to be a lottery of smarts and talent, and it's very, very unfair. And, JFK wasn't the first person to say life is unfair, but it certainly is.
Well,
and
I'm not talking
obviously we wish it.
I'm not sorry to interrupt, but I'm not talking about America as a closed network. I'm talking about the Skull and Bones folks at Yale as a closed network, and they want to keep it a closed network. I'm talking, and there's kind of the rules that they can work around. But that's sort of the point, and that's what you started saying. Not everybody's going to go to Yale or Harvard, or should even want to. You can go to Purdue and get as good an education, or any other number of schools. You're going for the brand, because I'm a firm acolyte of what Mitch Daniels repeats religiously. It's not where you go to school; it's how you go to school. And so you can come out and be wildly successful. Shahid Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, out of U of I, a Pakistani immigrant. Of course, you can in America. That's what's great about it. But what these families are trying to do, and I know something about closed networks because I'm in the biggest one in the country here in Chicago, are saying you don't get to come in unless you're invited. That's really what the position is of the Boston Brahmins and the New England elite, and that's what I think it's so easy to chafe at, but it still doesn't get you to what the system should look like.
Yeah, that's right. It is a kind of rat race, and Mitch Daniels is probably my favorite college president in the country, not least because he has fairly easily and with wisdom kept costs down.
Yes.
Would that we had more. Would that we had more of him to go around.
So Singer helps 750 students. We only know about 17 of them. Do you think, to send a message to stop this, that the parents should go to jail, and do you think the kids should be kicked out of the universities, at least the ones that knew about this, that were taking the photos with wearing a crew jacket or a soccer uniform?
I think so. I think there ought to be consequences. How severe, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know about jail for the parents. Jail time in the American criminal justice system is very, very strange. Some people go away for a long time for what seems not very much, and some people seem to kind of skate. And I can understand sort of a punitive desire when it comes to these parents because they seem so reprehensible. They're really perfect villains. But I really don't know. I think this takes the wisdom of Solomon. I consider it, on the one hand, it's outrageous, but on the other hand, it's also tragic and kind of pathetic that people should be driven to these ends.
It is. Pathetic is actually the perfect description of it, because it is a reflection of what they value and what they're willing to do for the material, what they value in a material sense, because that's what we're really talking about, aren't we?
And also what they think is necessary for their sons and daughters to have a good, decent, fulfilling life. That is very, very sad. My gosh, there's so many colleges and universities in this country. Everyone really ought to find this place. And they're finite spaces at these elite universities. And, too bad. You suck it up and move ahead and do the best you can.
Right. I mean, look.
Not everyone gets a pony on Christmas. Maybe that sounds harsh, but it is true.
That's right. I mean, right here, we've got an example. Amy wanted to go to college, and so she had to go to Iowa. That was the only thing that was available.
Ooh. Go Hawkeyes.
Go Thank you.
Hayden Fry, one of my favorite people in American life.
He's great, yes.
He was a great football coach.
Yes, he
all right, you're also the music critic for New Criterion, so I want to get your take on this. We've been having this discussion here against the backdrop of the pending criminal trial of R. Kelly, the release of Leaving Neverland, the documentary of Michael Jackson. There's an op-ed Wall Street Journal about it. But how do you separate the artist from the artist's monstrous acts? Can you listen to R. Kelly music? Can you listen to Michael Jackson music? Should we be pushing for it to be eliminated from the public airwaves? How do you view it?
This is very, very personal. I love ABC and I Want You Back and so on. It's going to be a while before I can listen to Michael Jackson songs with enjoyment. It's going to be a long while. Maybe never. I'm not sure. There are these same issues in classical music. The so-called Me Too movement has ensnared a lot of these people, and there are a lot of real nasty people in the classical music industry as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to take a good long interval before I can listen to some of them again. And I just don't know. It's very, very personal, separating the artist from the man. I'm not necessarily good at doing it.
But
I can
shouldn't
do
we
it
have a
with people
choice,
from
though?
the distant past.
If they yank them off iTunes and things like, shouldn't we have a choice whether or not we want to listen to them? They seem to just want to, they're taking items out of the Indianapolis, Michael Jackson Museum. They're taking, they're just making, we're not really having a choice.
Well, at the Metropolitan Opera, and I'm sitting about 3 blocks from it, they've scrubbed the performances of James Levine
Right.
from the archive of recordings. They just scrubbed them.
Yeah, that's
He was
crazy.
music director for 30 years, something like that.
That's
But
crazy.
that probably won't last forever, and I think that's an extreme response. I do understand it, but it's really, really a tough one when you're talking about criminality and especially sex crimes. Somehow it's a little bit different from robbing a bank, you know? This, Kelly and Michael Jackson, if they had robbed banks, I might say ho-hum and, listen to their music. Sex crimes is different somehow, don't you think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially
I agree.
involving children. I mean, to compare it to like the.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I mean right. So that even the Met Opera example, obviously that's different. That's a Me Too thing. This is children. That's a whole different category, as you know. He is Jay Nordlinger. He's a senior editor for National Review, music critic for the New Criterion. Jay, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
You too. Do you have a CSO strike going on?
We do.
It's like every 11 months we have one here. So
Yeah,
Okay.
we do, and I'm.
Okay, so it's dog bites man? Yeah, never mind that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm working on my cello, so it's if I need to cross the picket line. Jay, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
At last we can get in. Thanks.
Exactly. Take
there's
care.
hope, guys. Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's